Okay, I see we have some folks starting to come in. I appreciate all of you being here. This is an exciting webinar, a little bit different than what we've done in the near past. So it's gonna be a good time. So the um, the topic today is motorsport simulation. The a new function that we've recently came out with here at AiM is the ability to take motorsport simulation data and bring it into the AiM Race Studio software for analysis. And that's one piece of it, though. We also have the ability to bring that same data from the motorsport simulation hardware, computer programs, and direct it towards an AiM display, as you see in the upper left-hand corner. And you can have a piece of hardware that you configure and have ready to go, and be looking at your shift lights and your warning lights and all the different things that you might want to have. And then, of course, being able to practice downloads and of course the data side. We'll get into some of those details here in just a few minutes. But also realize that in order to do this in using iRacing or rFactor or Assetto, you do not need AiM hardware. So it's really a two-step process. One of them is where we can just bring the data directly from your PC while you're running the sim, and the other one is, and can be connected together, run some AiM hardware on your sim rig as well. So keep that in mind, that we can do both, but you don't have to have hardware in order to make this work. So keep that in mind. Again, I appreciate everybody being here. I see the numbers have grown a bit, and so we'll go ahead and get started. A couple of just things that we always try to make sure you understand as we're working with this. If you press the Q&A button on your Zoom control bar, you'll get a box that comes open. If you have questions about something we're covering during this webinar, make sure you type them into the Q&A box. We have a number of great folks that are in the background that are answering those questions if we want to answer them in just by typing an answer to you, or myself and my two co-hosts will take some of those questions and answer them live as well. So if you have a question that you want answered for this one, make sure it goes into the Q&A box. You also have a chat box. Make sure you have that opened up, and in that chat box, we certainly watch it and we follow along, but we don't pull questions out of that. So if you have some nice questions, you want to talk to your friends that are here, or the other folks that are in the background, go ahead and chat in the chat box. But make sure you have down where you type into the chat box, there's a to button. By default, it only comes up to all panelists. So if you put a chat in there and send it out, everybody in the chat box does not see it. Only the 4 or 5 of us panelists are actually looking at your responses. So the first thing you should do is go over to that box where it says all panelists, hit the little pull down arrow and change that to all panelists and attendees. Then everybody will be seeing your chats. And that'll be very, very helpful. Then everybody sometimes will answer back, and everybody sees an answer but didn't see the question. So make sure you change that. That'll be great. Okay. Perfect. I'm gonna start it off as we often do here with a quick poll. The poll we're gonna start off with today is owned AiM devices. It's always helpful to us. You're gonna hear a little bit about how we change up our webinar schedules based on some of these polls, and this is one of those that really does help us. So if you own some AiM devices, what devices do you own? And use select all that apply. It's a multiple choice, so if you have some different things, make sure you grab all those. If the piece of hardware you have is not on there, we have one topic right at the bottom, SmartyCam and /other. If you select other and you have some other piece of hardware, that we only have 10 spaces for answers. So if you have something else, go ahead and type into the chat box other, / and then what your device is. I scan that as well to try to understand fully what's going on here. So, but if you got a SmartyCam, that's the button for you to push. So I appreciate all of the effort into doing the polls. It's always fun, and it's interesting to understand where everybody's at. I'm going to let that run for a minute, and let's talk a little bit about who's helping in the background. We've got some of our great AiM tech staff is working in the background. We've got Robbie and Cameron, who have been here for every one of our I think this is our 18th webinar that we've been doing in a row here. So they've been in the back answering those questions and helping out, and even co-hosting a time or two here or there. We also have Brick from our Roanoke office back there answering questions as well. So you'll see responses from those three guys giving you some information, answering questions in the text box and in the question and answer box. So keep that in mind. We have two co-hosts today, so that's something that's a little bit new for me. I'm going to end that polling so that gets that out of the way for those of you that are watching that. I appreciate you guys doing that. So we have two co-hosts today. The first one is an old friend that I've known for quite some while. He lived up here in the Seattle area, and I got to meet him and work with him a little bit here and there. He's been doing some data analysis webinars with us here. I think this is his third or fourth one, and he's also a sim racing enthusiast. So we thought it would be great to bring James in and give us a hand on this one. And he's been using it for a week or so, a little bit of pre-production stuff, plus of course using it now that it's available to all of us doing that. James, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and a little bit of the sim racing tie as well. Oops, James.
Sure. Thanks for having me back. It's lovely to be here talking to you all again. And hopefully you can all hear me.
Yep.
I've loved racing. I've raced for years. I've dabbled my hand. It's actually, I've got Compass 360 and Bimmerworld up here on cars that sim racing will allow me to be able to drive in a scenario where I probably wouldn't be able to drive that in real life, which is immediately one of the most brilliant parts of it. Throughout my racing, I've always loved data. And I'd say probably 10 years ago, I was doing sim racing, but with Forza on the Xbox. And then more recently, I bought Gran Turismo on PlayStation, but never really got into it, never had the wheel and the pedals type of thing. And all of a sudden, with the lockdown, we started to do a lot more sim racing. I was introduced to iRacing for the first time, which I think is brilliant. And then all of a sudden, the very next place I went to was, God, it'd be lovely if I could look at data and analyze data. And so since using iRacing for only probably a month now, we've been looking at different ways of being able to log and analyze data. Only to have a conversation with the folks at AiM, and they're like, oh yeah, just wait a few weeks. And I was like, okay. And so for the last week, we've been playing around. And so it's been fantastic to be able to apply a lot of what we've been doing for years, but with sim racing. And yeah, really enjoyed it. And it's also been able to help me out with racing with friends. So lovely to be able to say to everyone what I've learned so far, and also to talk about what I haven't learned so far, which we can all sort of work through.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's a brilliant mix of professional development, and if you're a racing enthusiast or a racer, or a sim, a professional sim racer, or if it's just for fun, right? There's this beautiful mix of sim racing when it comes to motorsports like this. So going to be interesting to have you chat about a little bit deeper. While I move on to Emiliano's slide, I look over at the chat, and Robbie is doing what Robbie does a lot, which is throwing up just a bunch of nice links for you. By the way, you can click on those links in the chat box, take you to different websites, different things that Robbie will continue to do the rest of the day. So keep your eye over in that area as well. Let's see, the next person that's going to be co-hosting with us today is Emiliano. Emiliano has been here with us in most of the webinars, and doing a great job in the background, even has spoken and talked a little bit about, but he's going to co-host us fully with this one. Emiliano, I've known Emiliano ever since I started to use AiM data, and emailed back and forth, and then we meet every year at the PRI show currently in Indianapolis, and always have a good time. So Emiliano, tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more depth, and your background in not only motorsports but also in sim racing. I think we're having a little bit of delay, but
hello.
Emiliano, there you go.
Emiliano is I'm basically a developer.
We're doing well. We can hear you.
Okay, it's good now. Okay, yep. Hello everybody. I'm basically a software developer, and I developed for AiM in the last 20 years. I developed the Race Studio 2 analysis software. I developed the drag analyzer software a good part of the Race Studio 3 software, and I'm now developing the Race Studio 3 analysis. That's kind of late, but it's coming. I have a background as a mechanical engineer. I have a strong passion for motorsports. I live near the Monza racetrack, and my passion started when I was a kid. Going in the Sundays, I went there to see races, superbikes, Formula One, whatever. I have a when I was a kid, I had a great passion also for video games, for simulators, for racing video games. Times of I'm speaking of GP Legends and and the NASCAR racing I used to play with, and that passion is kind of coming back now with the iRacing and all the simulators integration that we realized with AiM software and AiM hardware. So happy to be here helping, and that's it.
Perfect, perfect. I realize we're having a little notchiness to the stream. This has happened a couple of times with our webinars. Every other time it's done this, it's gotten better. So yeah, hopefully you can live with it for the next minute or two, and hopefully it will begin to smooth out as we go forward. Sounds to me like it's already gotten a little bit better. So apologize for that. The perfect. Thank you, Todd. I just seen that fine on your end. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I normally don't do like an agenda for things like this, but we're gonna throw out quite a bit of information. We're looking at maybe we'll have some good questions from folks. So I want you to know kind of where we're going to go. So if you're going to ask a question, maybe if we let you know where we're going to kind of go with this, you'll have an idea of where we're heading, and maybe you know where to get to your question, or at least when to ask the question. So we're going to talk first about the value of motorsport simulation, just some of the stuff that you can do with it. We're going to talk about turning on the simulation telemetry in the racing sim itself. We're going to talk a little bit about that with a focus on iRacing, but we're going to set up Race Studio 3 to import that data to that simulation data. Do we want to pick all channels versus the most valuable channels, the advanced versus basic, levels? We'll talk a little bit about that and maybe some future stuff there. Where do you store the files? You're going to be asked how to do that in the program. We're going to walk through those steps and show that to you. And opening up with the simulation data in Race Studio 2 analysis, which is where most of you want to go. And of course, that is all done. You don't need to own any AiM hardware. Just this little app that we're going to talk about creates that process. And then if it's on the same computer, obviously you'll just open up Race Studio 3 and go. If it's on a different computer, move it around from your race sim and over to another computer, to your laptop, to do your analysis. However you wish to do it, the options are yours. Of course, we're going to look at that data in Race Studio 2, and then we're going to kind of end with we're going to just jump out to the website, to the AiM website, where we have a page just about motorsport simulation. You probably have you may have already seen that, and then we'll also talk about some documentation that we've got written already that will no doubt be enhanced and improved, and show you. It's a great place to go grab that as you're going to start working with this, and give you some directions on how to do what we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about the value of motorsport simulation. My friend Davin helped me last night. I had some decent ideas of where we were kind of, the value of this, but I wanted to reach out to somebody that does it quite a bit as well. And there's just any number of things, right? Number one, just learning tracks. These simulation programs now, the tracks are so modeled so well. My experience with iRacing, they're actually scanning the tracks, and so if you're going to go run at a track in the future, if you drive race cars for a living, or as an amateur, and you're going to go visit a track you've never been before, boy, the racing sim is just a fantastic thing to go visit a track and learn the corners and understand the look and the feel from the driver's seat. There's you can get a little bit of that from video and some other things, but nothing like sitting behind the wheel of the sim. So that whole learning track thing is very important. Of course, then from the technical standpoint, you have the ability to to make some changes in the sim, right? Change that anti-sway bar, or change the shock settings, move some stuff around, tire pressures, shift points, all these different things you might do, and then grab that data, bring it over, and open it up in Race Studio, and take a look at and compare. So you go out and you do a session or two with one setting and a session or two with another, and bring it together and say, okay, where did it help? Where did it hurt? There's there's that whole data engineering and data structure side of it is very powerful. And of course, from a data guy and somebody that teaches these topics as my job, I love it that you can go grab some data of your own and bring it in, and then just practice your data skills. Practice your downloading, practice your opening it up, and then of course using your own data to practice different things that we've talked about, friction circles and channel reports and all the different things we've talked about in some of these webinars. So very powerful. The other couple of things that especially Davin brought up is that whole mental aspect of motorsports. You can simulate that you're going to go out and you're going to do a qualifying run, and the mental aspect of changing your mind and saying, okay, this is a qualifying run. This is all out. This is 100% of trying to get the most out of this car, and don't worry about tire wear and some of those other things. This is my mindset, and then turn that around. And then the next session, you're going to go out and you're going to do an hour-long stint in an endurance race where you don't maybe drive that quite that same way. So it's a great mental tool to adjust yourself and get you thinking correctly when it comes to how hard you charge and charge different corners and things. So that the mental part of it, and then the physical part, which is the and maybe you're working on your brake application. Maybe you're working on your heel and toe. You're doing different things, and the simulator is just a great way to be able to do that with little to no cost and little to no danger. If you dive in there and you decide, okay, let me try to change the way I brake, and try a couple things and see how it works out. A very powerful tool with Motorsport Simulation. So think about the value of the Motorsport Simulation, and that it has a lot more ways of using it than you might think. Of course, it's great for that whole professional development, or working on the development of you as a race car driver, or as a data person, or whatever. But a big part of it is just fun, so it's a great time on top of it all. So it's the perfect tool. I have one more before we jump into and start looking at how to set this thing up and how to turn on the simulation telemetry with James. I'm gonna launch one more poll, and just ask you what motorsport simulation programs do you use? It is multiple choice, but if you're mainly using one, that that is fine. But and I did put in other because as of right now, we do currently today iRacing and Assetto are working today, and rFactor and Emiliano can talk about this in a moment, but we're just days, a day or two, maybe even sooner with the other. So and then of course there's other, and if you're selecting other here, please do the same thing for me, and in the chat box tell us what you're using, and maybe it's one of those that if we have the ability, maybe we start bringing in that data if we see that there's a bunch of people that are using a certain sim program that we do not import as of right now. So we're going to let that kind of go for a second. I'm going to jump to the next slide while that is playing. If you finish it, if you're finished and you hit the submit button, that box goes away. We'll bring that results up here in just a quick second. Before I take that box away, I'm just going to start with we are going to look at basically iRacing is kind of our focus here, and when we look at the results of this, you'll see why as well. But it's what we know as well, those of us that are giving this quick webinar. So in fact, let me just go ahead and end that polling in about 5 seconds, and then I'll show you what the results are. But so all of our slides are going to be more or less focused on the iRacing side, but the process works from the AiM import side. The process is virtually exactly the same. So I'm going to end that polling, and let's share those results with everybody, just so you can kind of see it. The results for for our poll, iRacing is 69% of you that are here are either use it or are expecting to in the near future. Assetto being the next one at 25%, and rFactor at 10, and other with 25. So I don't get a chance to watch too much what is happening in the chat box, but I look forward to seeing that later. Again, if you've selected other, please let us know what the other is, and we'll work from there. So I'm going to stop sharing those results, and I am going to move this over here a little bit, and I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to remote control and give the keyboard and mouse to James. James, what this next few slides we're going to talk about? James grabbed some slides, some screen captures of iRacing. He's going to talk about how to set this up. This is a manual thing that needs to be done by you as the user, or else the file is not created and it's outside of AiM's control. So James, give us a little bit of an idea of how this works.
Sure. So unless you have a third-party software that is automatically turning on data capture, or what iRacing calls telemetry, yes, you have to tell iRacing to be able to log the data. And so eager that I was to be able to figure this out, even before I knew where I was going to analyze it, I went through a process of being able to find out where it was. And so wanted to be able to just show folks this a little bit, even though for many of you, you're like, okay, that's pretty straightforward. So I've put some small arrows on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see them, as to where you should be looking based on what's happening. So the first thing is when you're in iRacing, this is just before we started test, as a race we're doing with some friends on Friday, and we've been practicing at Lime Rock. You'll notice on the right-hand side where the arrow is pointed to and the actual mouse cursor is, there's nothing there right now. And basically this means that I don't actually have telemetry engaged yet and switched on. So what you've got to do is you've actually got to go and tell iRacing to be able to start logging telemetry. And it's one of those things that you've got to be able to work through. So I'm clicking on the arrows. Roger, I don't know if it's changing on yours. For the screen here, let me see if I can move that forward with the mouse as well.
If not,
if you could just forward it, move it forward, that'd be lovely. So you do that by going into effectively the controls. So if you go into the control setting, where you usually go in and you configure your steering wheel and you set everything up, as you're in this page on the right-hand side, I was always looking for the word data. It seems to be part of my vocabulary and everything that I do, but it's not there. It's actually labeled telemetry. So if you look on the right-hand side, there's something called toggle telemetry. Now, typically, this is set up as Alt-L. So if you're using iRacing and you want to turn telemetry on and off to log data from that session, you'd use Alt-L. Now, if you're the one like me, I hate using the keyboard during a race. I don't have it nicely set up. It's usually on the floor next to me and I'm mashing buttons. And if any of you realize that it also puts commentary out to the team, I've told other drivers that I'm pitting and doing all sorts of stuff, when in reality, I'm just trying to change the view. So I've tried to minimize that as much as possible by putting as many controls as I can on my steering wheel so I can work through it. So what I've done is I've actually nominated a button on my actual steering wheel that turns telemetry on and off. And so that's useful just in case I happen to have forgotten to turn it on, just in case there may be a scenario where I do or don't want to test and gather the data. Now, that might seem strange for someone who's data hungry to be able to say, well, why would you want to log the data? Well, the reality is that there may be some scenarios where you're testing something, or your first time at a track, or you're just going to be messy for a while, maybe not necessarily want that data. You can turn it on and off. So it's important that you nominate where you want that. And just like any button, you would use that. If we flick to the next slide, Roger, if we can, as we do, we can assign that. I've just talked through this one as well, so we can put that in. So if we go back to the next slide as well, this is what happens. So if you remember that arrow that we had previously, if you notice what it's looking at right now, now it says telemetry on the screen, and there's a little radio button that's gray. That means telemetry is switched on and it's ready to start logging data that you have. If you, and if we click to the last slide on this one, Roger, while we can, when you're actually in the car and you're in the session, telemetry moves around. Now, many of us know you can move these variables around, but this is what you're looking for. You're looking in the bottom left-hand side that I have, and this is where default is. I haven't actually moved these around and learned to change some of those variables yet. You're looking for telemetry, and that little radio button has now turned to red. That means it's logging the data, which is fact. That means it's going to be gathering all the data that you have for this particular session that you're running through. And so that's how to switch it on, how to switch it off. There are ways of having third-party software switch it on and off, but if you just want to use AiM and gather this data and you don't have those softwares, this is really important to do. And it took me a while to be able to find this. So I thought for some of you, I'm sure some of you are like, well, I knew that ages ago, and that's brilliant. But for some, that might not be the case. So the last thing I want to be able to show as well, and then we'll get into the other variables in terms of gathering the data before we look at importing. If you go to the last slide on this one, Roger, which I can probably control, but I don't want to mess it up.
I'll take care of it.
The last thing is people are like, well, great, where is the data? And so this is the other thing which is interesting. Many of you may have found where your iRacing folder is, and you may have found that obviously because it's where you'd go and work through certain parameters, like if you've got a setup that you want to drop in to a particular vehicle. In this iRacing location where your iRacing is stored, you'll notice that there's a folder called telemetry. That is the folder where all your data is going to be captured. So any sessions that you do, that is where the data is, and its file delineation is IBT. So that is your telemetry file. Now, we'll talk more about this in terms of manage that a bit later on, but it's important to be able to know where this is, because at that point, it's going to help in the next evolution of how you start managing that data going forward. So this is the first part of the iRacing tutorial, is just knowing where the data is. The next part is going to be able to go forward. But I think I'm handing it back to Emiliano and Roger now to talk a bit more about gathering, and then I'll be back to chat to you about how to import and work with that data.
Perfect. Thank you, James. That'll be helpful to a lot of different people. There was one question in there, and you did touch on it, and I'm not sure we're prepared to say any actual products, but other than VRS, is there a tool that will tell iRacing to start telemetry just on every session? Something like in the INI file, some sort of a setting. Do you know of anything? I do not off the top of my head.
I'm glad you mentioned VRS, because that's the only one that I know of. And VRS does, once you've got it, it fires up at startup when your PC starts up. Same as trading paints and any other. You may have wondered how I had those nice paint finishes on the cars. So that's some of those start up automatically. But if you don't have those, this is the function. And here's the thing: having those switched on is great, but one of the things that I found is that sometimes they don't switch it on. Oh. And so it's always important just to keep a mind's eye and a sort of a cursory look at being able to say, is it actually reading what's going on? So that's the other word of caution. Always know that function just in case. And that's why I have that button on the wheel.
Perfect. And visually, when you, if I back up one slide here, let's see if I can make that happen. Visually, to look down and make sure that telemetry icon is on the display is a good idea. Nothing worse than expecting data and not having it when you're done, right? So looking at that is very helpful. So, okay.
Correct.
Okay, let's jump ahead. The next thing we're gonna lean on. It should jump up to you in just a second. The next thing we're going to talk about is the process that AiM has developed. It does not turn on the telemetry automatically. Maybe Emiliano can touch on that if it's possible for us to do that or not. But Emiliano has programmed a little thing that we're calling the AiM Simulator Manager. We're going to talk about it quite a bit, 3 or 4 slides here. This is going to be a kind of an overview of what it's doing and how it works. I'll hand it over to Emiliano to talk about it. But it's a little routine that you can have automatically start all the time, or however you wish to have it, and then you're off and running. Now this little program, again, I'm going to back up to where I did in the opening. This little simulator manager is not only allowing iRacing to take that data, that telemetry file, that IBT file, and will convert it into and heck, bring it right into Race Studio 2 automatically. You don't have to do any import or anything. As soon as you open Race Studio 2 analysis, your data is there and you're off and working. But it also allows you the ability to put the hardware in your race sim if you wanted some AiM, an AiM MXP or a device in front of you to have the shift lights and everything as a hardware. It does both of those things, but you do not have to have the hardware. So just wanted to make sure we cover that again. It's that's been a little confusing in the last few days. So with that, Emiliano, I'd love to hand it over to you. I think the best thing for me to do, since it is just a little bit notchy, is I'll go ahead and select slides. You just talk about it. I'll point at where you're talking and select the different slides.
Okay, it's okay for me, Roger.
Perfect.
Yeah, as you already said, we need a software that's running on the PC together with the simulator in order to be able to do two things. You can either save data into your hard drive, or you can stream data to the AiM device. Saving into files, we created a small application to accomplish these two tasks. And the reason for which we created a small application is that we do not want to steal to use hardware resources that can be precious for the simulator to run. As a matter of fact, the small application we created is using a maximum of 5 megabytes of RAM, less than 5 megabytes, to tell you the truth. And just compared with Ray Studio 3, that we could have been relying upon to do the same task, but we decided not to use Ray Studio 3 because the Ray Studio 3 is a little bit heavier as a memory footprint. It's roughly from 40 megabytes to 400 megabytes. It depends on which kind of feature you are using of Ray Studio 3.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that there was a question of 2.5 RAM while idling up to 5. What about other CPU resources? There was a question there. Is there some other resources that it takes, or is that basically pretty darn light footprint?
It's basically saving a file on disk and streaming data via USB. It's not using graphic card memory. It's not using anything else.
Perfect.
It's 2.5 megabytes. It's say 5, but think about the fact that a simulator normally running takes a gigabyte. So it's really slow. It's really small. Our application.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll move.
You can go ahead to the next slide. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. That small application is installed with Ray Studio 3. Is included into Ray Studio 3 installer. So be sure you update your Ray Studio 3 version through web updates or download from our website. It's there since the in the 332 something. It's there.
Yep.
Now it's 06. Tonight we will release the 07 to support the rFactor 2 simulator that now it's not fully covered. As I said, Ray Studio 3 installs on your PC this small application that we named the AiM Simulator Manager, and you have three possibilities to run this application. You can launch the application directly from inside of the Ray Studio 3 with a menu that's inside of the settings menu, or you can place a link to this simulator manager on your desktop, or again you can place a link to this small application simulator manager. You can place a link into the startup folder of your menu, so to have it automatically launched by the operating system when you start your machine, and so that application is always running. You can go ahead. Okay, we said that this simulator manager accomplishes two tasks. One is saving the file, the telemetry file on the hard drive, and the other one is streaming to the AiM devices that are based on the USB. For iRacing, this is not the complete truth, because iRacing saves the file by itself, and James perfectly explained how you get this task accomplished. You can go ahead on the next one. On the three simulation platforms that now support in Assetto Corsa Competizione, you do not have the possibility to save the file. And so the AiM Simulator Manager accomplishes this task for you. It saves the telemetry file that is generated by Assetto Corsa Competizione, and here is the default folder where the file is generated. And the simulator manager is capable also to streaming data to the AiM devices. You do not need to have the AiM device to save data, so the two tasks are completely separated. We can go ahead and move over rFactor. For rFactor, the situation is slightly different. We need another small DLL that's a plugin for rFactor 2. That it's a plugin we created basing on their software development kit. And this plugin is installed by the AiM Simulator Manager. AiM Simulator Manager finds the correct folder in which rFactor 2 is installed and copies the plugin right there. For this plugin installation to be fully working, you have to remember to run the AiM Simulator Manager with the rFactor 2 not running. But if you do launch rFactor 2 before launching the simulator manager will tell you and will prompt you to close it in order to install the plugin. So it's pretty straightforward and should be easy to use. We can go ahead to the next slide, and we see. Okay, it's coming.
There you go.
The AiM Simulator Manager, once you run it, is pretty simple. It has 3-4 buttons. To start working with your simulator, you just need to hit the start button. If you did not, if it's the very first time you launch it, it will show a menu, a pop-up menu in which you choose which one is your simulator, and then it goes. I mean, you don't need to click the start button anymore, as this simulator manager will remember which is your choice, and the next time you launch it, it will automatically recognize that your simulator is streaming data, and it will be doing its job without you having to click start anymore. There's also a stop button. You normally do not need it. The only reason for which you may use the stop button is if you want pausing your simulator, if you want to upload a new configuration to your AiM device. This because this simulator manager takes most of the USB capabilities of the devices, and if you don't stop it, RaceU3 will not be able to send the configuration to the device. But this is the only reason.
Yeah, again, like we talked before, the only reason for that is if you're running the hardware piece of it. If you're just running the software stream, you'll probably never use the stop simulator stream button. So,
yeah,
okay.
just hit start once, and it will go forever.
Perfect. Okay.
Oh, here it is. If you want to use an AiM device and stream data to it, you need to create a configuration of the device using a specific ECU stream protocol. Look while you choose a protocol, look for a manufacturer named Simulators, and choose the model of the ECU stream that matches your simulator. Here in the picture we have only Assetto Corsa and iRacing, and now from tonight on we will have also rFactor 2. Save the configuration, use the channels for whatever you like to create alarms, to create conditions to create display channels, and it will work. The only thing you have to take care of is not to rename the channels of this ECU stream. This because the channels names are used to match data coming out of the simulator. And so if you rename the channel, the streaming will not be be effective.
Okay, there's a couple things I just want to, again, I mentioned it a couple times. This is only if you're going to run AiM hardware that you need to do this step. So if you're going to just be using your iRacing and grabbing that IBT file, this is a step you do not need to do.
Absolutely.
Just to reaffirm that. And then there is a question here that talks about which AiM hardware is currently supported. What hardware could they grab and put onto their sim rig?
At the moment, we support all our devices that are what we call 1.2. So the MXG and MXS 1.2, Strada or Pista, and the MXP at the moment. We are planning to see if the Wi-Fi connection is capable of supporting this kind of stream. And then we'll see if the Wi-Fi connection is if we can manage it using the Wi-Fi connection. Why not for the Micron 5 and for the Solo 2?
Perfect.
We're gonna try.
Yep, good. I just want to make sure everybody understands this is not a step you have to do if you're just running straight out of iRacing into Race Studio without hardware. So perfect. And
as I said before, you can use to test whatever. You can practice using a simulator your configuration, what the racer will see in the device pages, and you can practice your data ability. You can practice to get what James 2 weeks ago called data analysis discipline.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just like you would have in your race car or your motorcycle or your sprint car. Everything you want to set up, you can try it here first, right? You can bring that gauge in from the race car if you want during the winter, bring it in, set it up, create all the display pages, try them out, see what works for you, the shift lights, the alarms, predictive lap timing, and put those in different spots. It's a powerful tool for that. Again, that's that added value of the simulator, being able to do some things that might take you a couple weekends to get all those settings just perfectly right. So kind of cool. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is walk a tightrope at some level, right? This is not ever comfortable for me, but we're going to go and do some live, absolutely live work. James has created a file that he created, I believe he said last night. To hear those of us here, James is outside of London, so the time zones are a little different there. But James created this file, and what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Race Studio 3. I'm going to bring it up right now, just so everybody can see it. This is a live version of Race Studio 3 that we have running. The IBT file that was created in Race Studio, I'm sorry, in iRacing using the manager software that Emiliano has developed and talked about. That was created. That file was placed into a folder. James will go over some of those settings here in just a second. We've got this options button that's up here in the upper left-hand corner, and that's where a lot of this this first step is done in some of these settings. And James, I'll just run the mouse and you tell me where to go. But the basic thing is really going to work in these two menu items right here. Let's start with briefly. I'll just reiterate what Emiliano talked about. This is that screen capture he had a little bit ago, where you can launch it, remove the link from the desktop. But mine is linked right to the desktop already, and it's already set in the for startup. So mine is running and has been running there. Where James is going to talk about is this one right here. James, will go ahead and take over and talk a little bit about this function here.
Sure thing. And we could try me controlling the mouse, or you. I'm happy to do it. Do you want to give it a whirl and see if I can take over?
Let's give it a whirl. Usually the program is kind of settled down by now, and maybe it'll work. You should be able to click once and take over. There you go.
Perfect.
Sometime there you
go. So there we go. So it is It is working, beautiful. So you can obviously log your data with the automated manner. You can turn it on and off as we've demonstrated with the screenshots. But one of the most important things is being in a position to be able to manage your files. Now, if you have the simulator manager logging the files, it will put them in that folder called telemetry that is there, and it will always refer back to that folder for those files. If there's a new file from a session that's been created, it will tell you here if there are new files available for import. And the one that Roger was referencing, I did last night, trying to chase a friend of mine's lap time, who I know is on this webinar, who's probably smiling because I couldn't reach the time. It was interesting. We were working through. Now, before we get into importing the file, I just want to sort of talk a little bit in the settings area here. So if I scroll over and click on settings just quickly, oops, this might not actually work, Roger, with that time delay. It might be important for you to take over just so we can have smoothness here. Let me just give it one more whirl.
There you go.
And he knows who it was. He's in the Seth. And interesting enough, we were comparing IBT files last night, and me just going, how is he doing that? Well, now I know. Now, how is he doing that? I don't know. Now, what's interesting is we look here is that iRacing has got a nominated folder. Now, I said earlier on that iRacing is always going to look for a folder called telemetry, or AiM, Race Studio is going to look for telemetry, but it's actually called iRacing data here. So what Roger's done is he's created a separate folder where he's putting the IBT files that he wants to be able to analyze in a folder. Now, one of the things that you all may do in iRacing that I tend to do is I do a lot of sessions. Or I come out of a session and go in again because I crashed multiple times or I haven't done something right. I just don't want to look at that data. And first time I tried to import this, it said you have something like 59 files to import. One of the things that's interesting with AiM, with the iRacing files that come in the IBT, is that they are huge. They contain so many channels, of which the documentation you can work through and see what files that you may or may not want. That the first thing that's important here is to note that every file is quite sizable. The second thing is that if you just want to analyze a few of those so it doesn't convert audio files, nominate a separate folder that you want to be able to drop that file into. The reason that's important is that it won't try and convert all those files. And then the second thing that's important there is the fact that once you've imported that file, that is the place where Race Studio Analysis is going to look for that file every time it opens it. So if you're anyone like me who cleans out their telemetry folder every now and again, arguably at that point you may actually inadvertently delete the files that you want to be able to keep in Race Studio Analysis. So having a separate folder makes sense. The second thing I want to be able to point out here as well is that we have this thing called all channels. It's currently not ticked. There is a list of basic channels, which to be honest, are very advanced channels for nearly anyone who's ever worked with data. And then there's all files that come in from iRacing.
James, I'll actually scroll down and show that towards the end here. I'll show the difference.
Okay, lovely. So we can talk through that, which is good. That just limits the files and allows you to control it. So
this is where you set that, which is kind of handy to know.
It's so useful to set it because it changes the amount of files, and it'll be useful when you actually see the files that we're importing. So I'm going to click on cancel because we don't need to change those settings because Roger already had them set up. So if we click up here again in the top left and go to import files, one of the things we're going to see is that one file is there. Now I'm going to click on there and it's going to give me some options. Now the one you always want to have on this list is going to be the AiM DRK, which is the file that we will import that contains all the information that we will use for our analysis. There are other options which are available based upon requirements. Some may be balance of power things that are specified by a governing body, which may be the SCCA file. And then the other one I want as well is the Google file. Now I want that Google file on purpose because there's two things. One, I can then download that and look at that in Google Earth, which is great. And that file is also going to be useful in the future if we want to be able to see that, I believe, in Race Studio Analysis 3. And so if you want to go back to these files, it's useful to have those. So those are the two that I take. Then I click on Convert, and the little green bar will flash across, and that's it. As that finishes off its activity, that's that file now converted for use in Race Studio 3 analysis. So A lovely, straightforward way of being able to convert. Now, you may be wondering, you know, what happens if somebody gives me an IBT file? Same process. If you're sharing files, and interestingly, the group that I race with, we've already created a OneDrive or a Dropbox or whatever you want, and files are being dropped and managed. You know, and you grab it and you can use somebody else's file. So they give you an iRacing file, which we're looking at here. I'm sure the same exists with the other simulators. You can make sure that having that separate location allows you to be able to work that data there. So you've done that, and I'm just going to click on exit. And so the next thing we want to do is then straightforward, we want to open up Race Studio Analysis, which I know Roger's got open on this.
I will open that up in the background here. Let's bring it to the front.
Brilliant.
And you notice as soon as I did it, this progress bar started. The way that Emiliano has written this, as soon as you bring up Race Studio 2 analysis, it starts that process. And this computer has some issues sometimes with speed with this one here, but it basically took those files, those data files that IBT, it crunched it into AiM direct format files, and then opened up the test, and wherever you left your Race Studio version before, if you had a GPS window here and certain channels open, those will be the channels that are open. It also grabs this what it thinks is the last tiny little file. There's been some fixes to this already, is my understanding from Emiliano, that this evening when that new version comes out, it will not even, it won't be grabbing that even that last little file. It will go automatically to your best lap. So I'm just going to grab that lap for fun. And let me zoom out here. I'll give this back to James here in just a second. Let me just make sure that I'm going to turn it all on per lap color. Maybe it's just a little easier for everybody to see. And then turn on that scaling. Okay, with that, let me give remote control. James is just gonna, what James is gonna do is just kind of walk around, take a look at some of the different things that are available to us here. James, you should have control of the mouse if you want to just take just a minute or two and just show people what this data looks like.
I do. So few things to be able to think through first before we go anywhere. The first thing is I want to open up the test database, and you'll notice that it's brought in certain parameters that are here. The vehicle, the test type. Test type is always generic testing. You will have to be able to go into this file and change those parameters. Now, when you import data from your streetcar, when you import it from your streetcar and your drive to work, I mean, when you import it from your race car, the data that you get will be, you'll get a menu, and the menu will allow you to put in options, the track, the session type, the vehicle, the championship. It will bring in certain information that's available from, you know, iRacing, but what you'll need to do is you'll need to right-click on the session, and you'll need to click on test properties. Now, I won't be able to edit these right now because the session is open, but if you're comfortable with this, the first thing I like to do is to go in here and just clean it up a bit, put in the parameters. I usually change championship to iRacing, actually, because it helps me be able to distinguish between real life and sim life. That being said, I really doubt that I'd love to one day ever be in an M8 GTE Le Mans car, but you never know. So that might, you might be able to tell a little bit simpler from there, but at the same time, that's there. The other thing which is really important here, which I love with iRacing, is the comment section. One of the things that I'm sure you all will appreciate with iRacing is that the way you change track conditions and the temperature of the day dramatically changes performance on track, as it does in real life, but so much that it's more tangible and you can play with the settings. I always drop a few comments on there because it's useful to know, especially if I'm messing around with different setups that I may have found online or been shared by friends, just to be able to find different pieces of information that is there. So that's the first thing I wanted to be able to have a look at.
One thing I'd like to just talk about for a second before we move on, James, is that, and I've seen the question a couple of times, can we compare, you know, sim racing data with live data that has been worked in? One of the ways that I've been testing this is I had some family MX5 Cup data from Laguna Seca, and then we did it in the sim, went and ran that same exact car at Laguna, and absolutely yes, if it's a data file in Race Studio 2 analysis, you can compare it to anything else that you have from either both sim or real time at the track. So absolutely, we can compare data between real and sim data.
And it's interesting that that conversation has already been happening in the small racing circle that I have already this week. So I think that that's one of the big powerful features in terms of being able to start working on that aspect. Now, I think what's really interesting then is to be able to do the next thing, which I like to do, is I like to go to Lap Manager. I do this with race laps as well from real life, is that I just like to go in and clean it up. So right now, its reference lap is an 11.9 lap, which clearly, Seth, I did that in real life. But it's obviously an error. I'd at this point probably crashed and decided to exit out, and it was a terrible lap. But at the same time, you can clean up your laps here. Now, it's really important to clean up your laps for a number of reasons. That one of the features that I love about the AiM environment is that you can do everything you do with the same data that you run from a street point of view, from a racetrack point of view. You can set up a track map with your sectors. You can do split time analysis reports. And so just like you would do in any scenario, you want to be in a position whereby your data cleanliness, or hygiene as you may want to call it, is the same discipline you apply to the iRacing or to your sim racing that you would do to your regular racing, because you want to be able to do the same sort of analysis. So that's cleaned that area up there, which is lovely. And so now we can go back to the measures graph and start having a look at some of the data, which is great. So we're going to do that. So now we have all of the information that we need to be able to start analyzing our data, but we have so much more to be able to work with as well. And this is the beauty of iRacing, is that if you've ever wondered, I wonder if I'd use that channel if I got it set up, or wouldn't it be brilliant if I've got an AiM solo and I want to be able to have brake pressure and throttle position sensor and steering, all sorts of those variables are now absolutely available. But you'll also notice that there is a familiarity right now with this chart that you would have seen in any instance that you're doing. And so you've got the same measures, you've got the same aspects of what's going on. Everything is the same as you would do normally, which is brilliant. But here's a few things that I generally like to do. Now, the first thing I will say is that the GPS map is here, which typically doesn't come in when you import a road racing, a real life racing car. You have to build a track map and then GPS follows. Because we brought in GPS data from the sim, that's there, but you don't actually have the track map. So sometimes you don't know exactly where this is based upon the sectors you create. So the first thing I like to do is to actually go up and create a new map. So you can just go in here and, the opportunity to be able to map is there. Now, this has been fixed or will be fixed in other areas, but depending on the type of version you're using, iRacing data has a tendency to be mirrored. So if you want to be able
that has
to,
been fixed in the
so that has been
current
fixed. So
version, so you should be in good shape.
Good.
Yep.
So that's good. So depending on where you are, so that's your map. I'm not going to do anything that we normally do in terms of breaking it down because we don't have time, but we can look at that later. I'm just going to say map. Or let's do, just to make sure it's not random in your file there, Roger. Like, what the hell does map mean? Yeah. I'm just going to type LRP for iRacing, and there we've now created the track map. So all of a sudden, this feature is now enabled that we can see the track map as to where we are. So that's where I want to go. Before I analyze any data, the last thing I want to be able to see is I want to be able to make sure that the measures are in a place where I like them. So if you all remember from my previous seminars, my brain works this way. First, time distance. Am I doing well or not well in a certain point against another lap? Then there's GPS speed or speed to be able to see what I'm doing. And then I go down. For me, I like to have RPMs. Then I like to have throttle. Then I like to have brake. Then I like to have steering. It's a user preferencing. There's no scientific reason why. The only one I do like to be able to have is throttle and RPMs close to each other, just because you can then, those two are relatively correlated with each other based upon your application of the throttle. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that there are so many channels down the left-hand side, and you believe me, the number of answers that I give to folks who ask this question, which is how do I sort my channels? That is super important to be able to have, because in iRacing, you want to be able to have a nice, clean and easy way of being able to look at this data. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick throttle, move it to the top. I'm going to pick the brake. I'm going to move that to the top. I also like having gear. Now, this is brilliant. How often you get this, it may be calculated gear, but I drive, as I said, my car is 32 years old, so I'm not going to get an ECU telling my car what gear I'm in. Whereas in iRacing, I have this wonderful data, so I want to have gear as well. I love that one. That's a really nice one to be able to have. And then in here, there is also steering. Right, and I'm going to move that to the top. Then I'm going to say, oh, brilliant. I want to be able to see speed right at the top. So I can move that up. Then I want to be able to see RPMs. And then move that down. Then I want to be able to see throttle. I should have thought of less channels. This could be the most boring seminar in the world.
And now you're just fine tuning it to what you like.
Yeah,
which
I'm absolutely fine tuning it. Roger's got a much better radio voice than I do, filling in a gap. I'm usually like, hold on a second, I just have to do this. Can't think of two things at once. So we're just going to move that up as to where we are, and then I'm going to click apply and exit. That will move the charts that I have on the left-hand side. So if I click these are the ones I want. And I'm going to drop these ones out because I don't want them. Now, one of the things you notice is that Roger's got it set up right now for a stacked view. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to click here. So there we go. That's the view I want, which is perfect. It's everything I want to be able to see. I've got an extra one here, which I didn't ask for. So I'm just going to turn those off. And that's the view that I like. So I'm like, perfect. Now I can see everything I want to be able to see. And I have a little double click here just to make sure it zooms in on the page that I want. So now I've got my view and I'm like, brilliant. This is exactly like I would view it, maybe with a few extra segments that are in there, as I would do with street data. And then all I'm going to do is pick a few laps and just start seeing what I did. Now, I haven't actually looked at this file since I ran the session. So we could see some, oh, look, there's a 54.2 there. That's even closer to the lap time I was striving to get. So we'll just have a look at those two and see what the difference was. It's funny. I love it. It's like having your classroom work graded in front of the entire class. Which is lovely, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, I should have done that better. Yeah, I should have done that better too, which is good. So I know we're slightly over on time, so I'll stop in just a minute, but you can see that now I've got all of this data available to me that I can start working with to be able to see what was I doing. You can see that, you know, I've got some interesting things here, lose a bit of time going into that first corner, which is there. Okay, so I broke a bit earlier, tailed off the brake, rolled a bit of speed. Brilliant. Immediately, I've got some great data. Now, the most fascinating one is this last one here, where you're like, oh, all right, yeah, we're kind of like even Stevens there. That's really nice. And then all of a sudden, you know, I've got a really nice throttle application as we come through that last corner. With the red lap, but the blue lap is a little bit all over the place. And you can see the drop, and there's the time distance there, 0.2. Immediately, I'm thinking about iRacing data exactly the same way that I think about my regular racing. And it's just brilliant to be able to do, because of the people that I race and work with. We're in a position where, and I love, it's like my excuse calculator is starting again. I'll just put the stuff up and it's brilliant. I'm like, yeah, I should have done that. I should have done that. I can see all the comments, which is brilliant. So this is how I think about it in terms of working through. Now, what one of the last things I should probably recommend to folks to do is, because you get all these extra channels with iRacing, is to create a user profile. And you can create a user profile with these settings and call it iRacing. Now, here's the reason I love that. Is for two reasons. The first is that you can always go back to it. The second is when you import iRacing data and compare it with somebody else with iRacing data, you don't need to mess with the channel names or anything. You can share your profiles. You can look at the data equally with each other, and it's always going to be consistent. And so that's as far as we wanted to get for today. But I do believe that one of the things that I think would be a good continuation, and I'll make this recommendation, but maybe others would be interested too, is how do we then start working with the data that we ordinarily have never had before, and how does that help us be better at analyzing? That's something I'm personally working on as I start to work through this just a week in.
Perfect, perfect. And something you mentioned there that I want to make sure everybody understands the complexity of it is iRacing data. It may come from, and I'm going to take control here for a little bit. If I bring up my database that of just the, again, my Race Studio 2 is a little bit slow sometimes. I've got almost 4,000 tests in here. But you'll notice here that there's a test here from yesterday from a Pro 4 off-road race truck. And there's one here from an MX-5 Cup car that of the 2007 vintage. Jeff had sent me some data from a Porsche 919 from Watkins Glen. All that data comes in, but what's really cool about it is those channel names that Jeff just mentioned, they stay the same unlike normal full race cars with data coming from ECUs, these channel names, throttle is throttle in an off-road truck or a MX-5 Cup car or that Porsche. So comparing simulation data even from different cars is very, very easy, even more easy than doing real race car data. So keep that in mind as you're bringing these channels in. No matter what you use, it's going to have the same channel name. So it's your math channels are going to be easier to work with, and a number of things of your analysis. So very, very handy. I'm going to jump into in a minute and show the website and that document that is Robbie has linked to a couple times already in the chat. And we're going to look at some of those channel values, and we're going to talk a little bit more detail about channels. So I know we are a little bit long, but it's we're only a few minutes away from finishing up. I appreciate everybody hanging with us. So anything else you want to add, James, before I jump out and jump back into
There's so much I want to add, Roger, but not in today's time. I'm just looking at this data for the first time going, so yeah, I think there's a ton we can talk about here, and whether we do it in a separate one or whatever, I think this is something which is well worth digging into.
While it's not the most comfortable thing for me, I really, really enjoy being prepared and ready to go. What everybody just watched us do was absolutely the first time we did it with this data file, and we had Race Studio 3, bring it in, convert it to Race Studio 2. We opened it for the very first time. You've seen it crunching all the numbers, and James looks at this data for the very first time in front of God and everybody here, all of his friends. And interesting how you took a little bit slower line, got after the throttle much cleaner, much easier, and the speed on the exit was substantial. So yeah, our data eyes look very, very quickly, right? So it's kind of fun. Next, I want to jump back out to the presentation real quickly, and the questions and answers have kind of come, and I think we've handled them all. I don't see any that are sitting there being asked for us to do right now. There was one question that came up. Yeah, the USB connection, that's I think fairly straightforward. There is one other thing when you connect to hardware, to AiM hardware, that the USB does not deliver enough power to run the gauge. So it is not a single connection. There will be the USB connection, obviously, to get the ECU protocol and have it all being sent up to the gauge. But you also will need a 12-volt source of power for that gauge to work. Yep. You know, the backlight and the LEDs and all the stuff that's going to make it act like it's in your car. And Emiliano just affirmed that as well. So keep that in mind as you think about that. You will, if you decide to do the hardware piece of it, you will need an additional 12-volt power source. There are tons of different ways of doing that. You know, even a lot of older laptops, and you know, there's power bricks out there that output 12 volts, so you should be able to get to that fairly easily. So the next thing I want to do, just to kind of close this out and see where we go, is I wanted to bring up the website. I know Robbie has linked this a couple of times. This specific page is something new that we've put out here at AiM, and it's just a page of our sim racing. A lot of different information. You can always be checking back in here for any updates, things like that. We talk about either the hardware or the software, all the different things that are available to you, and then some examples of some data analysis stuff. This happens to be the examples that Emiliano used here on the website. This is the red lap here is sim data. From a couple of weeks ago, and the blue lap is an actual Mazda MX-5 Cup race from Laguna in 2007. So this is looking at data from actual race cars and sim data, just to reiterate that question one more time. So, but another thing, I'm going to zoom back up at the top, make us all sick as we're watching this. But the one last thing I did want to talk about as far as the website, there is a documentation button here. It's also down at the bottom. There's several different ways to get to it, but I'm going to click on this and open up this this little page and then go to the user guide. Robbie has linked that already, and this will be linked in the YouTube description box down below if you're watching this recorded on YouTube later. This user guide goes through a lot of what we've talked about here, and with some more direction. So if you want to take a look at how to get this, which gauges are available for you to use as of today, how to configure your display if you want the hardware side, enable that transmission to the dash, and so forth, how to set up the simulator manager. So that document is available to you on the website, or linked in the chat box, or certainly will be in the YouTube part as well. So keep that in mind as you're looking at that. Let me minimize that. Let me jump back to this. As we're kind of finishing up, James and Emiliano, I want to give each of you another shot at anything that you think we've missed. I've rambled on a little bit. James, first, is there anything that that you want to reiterate one more time before we start to close this out?
No, I think we've covered most of the points.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Emiliano, anything you would like to add now that we've chatted about a few things since you've chatted?
I just add a big thank you to everyone of our attendees, and I'd say that every suggestion, everything they want to tell us, just use the address software@aimsportline.com.
Perfect. That's how you get a hold of Emiliano. And if you have any questions, and we talked about it on some Facebook posts as well. Boy, if you find something that this is new to us and we didn't beta test it a ton, so you're going to find that there's some channels that maybe don't come across right, or there's some things you'd like to see or like to do. Go ahead and talk about it on the Facebook sites where we've been interacting, and we love that as well. But boy, software at aimsportline.com that Emiliano, and we'll bring that up in a minute on our final slide. That gets the information directly to him as fast as possible, and then he can make those tweaks and continually adjust. So we're 3 or 4 versions into this after people have already started to use it, including the one that's coming out in several hours. So continue to send that information to Emiliano. I mentioned I was going to do something, and I want to make sure I do it. It was on this document here. I'm making everybody dizzy, but that's, of course, here's iRacing. Down here in the appendix, there's we talk about the basic channels and the advanced channels. The basic channels are pretty darn advanced, as James mentioned earlier, and I told you I would show you. But here are the channels that come in if you do not select that one box earlier. Remember when you were setting things up, it had all channels. You could select the all channels button, and you would get these advanced channels if that is selected. The basic channels are the ones that we've got as of today that are being brought in if you do not select all channels. It is, for the most part, what everybody will want. Okay. The thing is when since we're here, let's jump down and show you what some of these advanced channels are. There is tire temperatures, there's frame rates, there's all sorts of things, right? The list is quite long, and if there is if you're looking at this data and you don't want to bring in everything, but maybe there's something down here that we ought to consider putting into the basic channel. Maybe, or we make a medium choice or something that has tire temperatures and shock pots or stuff, whatever. Give us the feedback at software@aimsportline.com and let us know. These are certainly adjustable, right, Emiliano?
Yeah, it's right. I'd like to mention also that for the advanced channel, some of them cannot be available on some types of cars. Okay. So it depends on the cars also. But normally they are, but not always.
Yeah, and some of them don't mean as much, or some things mean more, right? If you go to that Pro 4 off-road truck, there's certain things here. The shock sensors are giving you some pretty wild looking data, right, compared to other ones. So keep that in mind. Okay, I wanted to make sure I showed this because I mentioned I was going to. So let's jump back out. Oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'd add. Sorry to give you an interrupt. I see in the questions people asking about kart simulator.
Go ahead and talk about that for a second.
We choose these 3 simulators because we know that they are pretty popular in our people. But why not? Just again, as before, shoot an email at aim@aim-sportline.com, and we will consider other possibilities. Why not?
Yeah, perfect. As we're kind of on our way out, I want to launch one more poll just because it's one that I really lean on heavily for information. It's select the top 3 topics you would like to see in future webinars. we absolutely change what we do based on these, and you're going to see a slide here in a moment where we talk about what we're going to do next Tuesday, and it's based on a lot of the feedback that we've been getting from you. So if you would just pick the top 3 that you like, I would appreciate that. While that's in your way, if it's in your way, go ahead and click on the submit button. I'm going to go ahead and go a couple slides ahead and talk about a couple of things while you guys are finishing up that poll. This webinar that we're in right now is recorded and will be going to our YouTube site, just like all the rest of them have been so far, plus a ton of other ones out there. Make sure you visit the YouTube site. Lots and lots of great training and support videos out there for you. Again, we are pretty excited. Some of us have been back out to tracks already. I know a lot of you have maybe hit your first race last weekend or are coming up this next weekend. I'm so happy for everybody that we're getting to get back out there. Racers are built in a special way. That way, we don't like to be sitting around not doing too much like this. So we look forward to seeing you out there. We're a big customer support company, and we really want to be out there at the track with you. So if while we can't, or even during the week when we're not at the track, give us a call, drop us an email. We're here to help. So the next webinar, the next webinar is going to be motorcycle data analysis. We've gotten a lot of feedback. I'm going to end that poll in just a couple of seconds in case you haven't ran the poll yet. We're going to have a motorcycle expert come on and talk with us. Mark is going to come in and join us and talk about motorcycle data analysis and what to look for in bike data. Now, if you're not a bike guy, please go ahead and visit with us and be here. The data analysis steps and tricks and the tools that he'll use are great analysis tools, and they'll go across the board. But he's just going to put a little bit of a flair, the lean angle, and maybe there's a different line in motorcycles, in motorcycle data, that kind of a thing. But the data analysis tips and tricks, it's always great to hear from other folks that use this data in different ways and at different depths. And Mark is an expert user of Race Studio analysis. You'll probably get some tips and tricks just like you have from James and James Clay and other ones and all the rest of the co-hosts we've have. You'll pick up cool little things. But been getting lots of emails and so here we are. We're gonna have a motorcycle data analysis, at least a couple in the next couple of weeks. Mark will be doing this first one, and then we'll go a little bit more advanced a little bit later. So I'm going to end that polling and then share that poll as we get ready. The winner again, everybody really likes the data analysis stuff, and James loves that too. Obviously, when we got in there, he could have slipped in there and we could have been doing data analysis still, right, James? But my favorite as well. So that one was at 74%. Number 2, configurations. We talked a little bit about configurations recently and had a good time with that. And it's number 2 at 44%. Track maps still, and we have on the schedule probably in the next 3 or 4 webinars, somewhere in there, we allow these things to shift and to hit the things that are really of interest. Like this one here was one we pushed way forward because it's a newly available to you. So we like to be able to shift them. But track maps and a lot more in depth on track maps is coming up very soon. So there's your poll results for what you guys are looking for as far as your top 3 topics you'd like to see. So I'm going to get that out of your way, and then move on to the next slide. And it's kind of our closing slide. I wanted to make sure that we spend just a minute on this one this time, is especially for Emiliano. He talked about an address for if you have questions about this. Certainly you can CC myself or James, but that software at aimsportline.com is a really critical one, and Emiliano gets those emails directly. And he's the guy that makes the tweaks and makes this happen. So if you're using the race simulation package, make sure you test it out, try a few things, and make sure you let us know what you think, because it's something that we can adjust. So with that, I think we're going to probably close it out. This has been a great one. The guys in the background, Cameron and Robbie and Robinson and Brick have been answering questions like crazy. I appreciate that. The chat box was crazy busy as well, and I do appreciate that. Thank you to James and Emiliano. I know it's a lot of work to put these together, and you guys worked hard and you put together some really good information, and I think the folks that watched it really enjoyed it. So looking forward to next Tuesday for our next webinar with the motorcycle data. Thanks everybody for coming. I do appreciate it. It's been a great time here today, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday.